the firm that turned Stamford Bridge into a battleground. They called themselves the Headhunters, a name whispered across terraces, feared in back streets. But behind the legend lies a story of hate, loyalty, and chaos. Before football became business, before the money, the cameras, and the global crowds, there was chaos. In the 1970s and 80s, English stadiums weren't temples of sport, they were battlegrounds. And at the heart of London, behind the blue of Chelsea, rose one of the most feared firms the game had ever seen. They called themselves the Headhunters, a name whispered in pubs, feared on the terraces, and hunted by the law. To their enemies, they were savages. To their own, they were family. For decades, they turned Stamford Bridge, the home of Chelsea Football Club, into a war zone. This is the story of the firm that defined an era of fear and left scars that England still remembers. By the mid-1970s, English football was unrecognizable. London was divided, east, west, north, south. Every club had its army, and every weekend was a test of loyalty. At Stamford Bridge, in the shadows of the old Shed End, a reputation was being forged. Chelsea supporters, young, rough, fearless, began to fight for control of their end. It wasn't organized at first, it was instinct. You defended your club, your color, your mates. That's how it started. But by the late 70s, those fights weren't random anymore. Groups began to form, names started to matter. Among them, one stood out. They called themselves the Headhunters, a firm born from the heart of West London, ruthless, loyal, and hungry for fear. They traveled across the country: Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool. Wherever Chelsea played, trouble followed. What began as defending the Shed was now a declaration of war. Soon, this wasn't just a crowd. It was a brotherhood, a firm that would take the chaos of the terraces and turn it into an empire. By the early 80s, the Headhunters weren't just a crowd anymore. They were an organization. There were leaders, men who decided when to move, who to hit, and where to meet. Lieutenants, scouts, lookouts. Everyone had a role. New faces came in through the terraces, through friends, through family. You didn't fill out a form. You earned your place with your fists. For those inside, it wasn't mindless violence. It was loyalty, brotherhood, respect. You fought with your mates, you protected your end, you never ran. That was the code. The Headhunters weren't the biggest firm in Britain, but they were one of the most disciplined. They moved like a unit: trains, convoys, pub meetups. Dozens could disappear into London and reappear miles away in seconds. Every fight added to their legend. Every arrest only made the name stronger. It was loyalty forged in chaos. A tribe in blue, proud, violent, untouchable. To outsiders, they were thugs. To each other, they were family. But behind the laughter and the loyalty, darker forces were beginning to creep in. Every legend needs faces, and by the late 80s, the Chelsea Headhunters had theirs. Men like Andy Frayne, known on the streets as the Nightmare. Sharp dresser, quick with his fists. A man who could turn a football Saturday into a battlefield. Then there was Jason Mariner, loud, fearless, proud of the chaos. The kind of man who'd call it defending Chelsea's name, no matter what it cost. Around them, dozens of others. Some were dockers, some builders, some just lads from estates around West London. But once inside, there was no turning back. They weren't just football fans anymore, and they were soldiers of a cause. Not political, not religious, just blue to the bone. Police knew their names. So did rival firms. Millwall, Spurs, West Ham. Every clash was a test. Every weekend a headline waiting to happen. They were heroes to some, criminals to others. But to themselves, they were legends in their own story. As their reputation grew, so did the darkness around them. And soon, the firm would step out of football and into something much more dangerous. By the late 1980s, the violence had gone beyond the terraces. It wasn't just about defending Stamford Bridge anymore. The Headhunters were taking their war to the streets. Pubs became battlegrounds. Train stations became ambush points. And in London, the Headhunters earned a reputation that even police feared. The name Headhunters became a warning. Police intelligence files listed them among Britain's most dangerous football gangs. But something darker began to creep in. Far-right groups saw potential and began to recruit from the terraces. Not everyone in the firm followed that path. but those who did would stain the name forever. The violence stopped being about football. It became something else. A cause, a power trip, an identity that thrived on fear. And when arrests came, when the courts finally caught up, many saw it not as justice, but as another battle to win. The Headhunters had crossed the line. No longer terrace heroes and now national enemies. But even as the country turned on them, their legend only grew stronger. By the early 1990s, the tide had turned. Decades of violence had finally caught up with the Headhunters. Undercover operations, surveillance, and years of intelligence gathering, the police were ready to strike back. Dozens were arrested. Some served time. Others disappeared quietly, their glory days reduced to headlines and court dates. Chelsea FC was changing too. New ownership, new fans, and a club desperate to bury its violent past. The terraces that once echoed with battle cries were now filled with tourists, cameras, and club merchandise. But not everyone let go. Some still wore the old name like a badge of honor. Others felt betrayed by the club they once fought for. The Headhunters weren't gone. They had just gone quiet. In a new era of football, all-seaters, CCTV, global TV deals, the old ways didn't fit anymore. But beneath the surface, the legend still whispered. Time moved on. The faces changed. The song stayed the same. The Chelsea Headhunters became a story, a warning, a legend, told in pubs, retold online, mythologized by those who were there, and by those who only wished they had been. For many, it was about pride. For others, regret. But no one who lived through it ever forgot the name. English football cleaned up its image, but it never erased its scars. The Headhunters showed what happens when passion turns tribal, when loyalty becomes obsession, and when the game on the pitch is no longer enough. They called themselves a family. They called it pride. The world called it fear. The terraces are quieter now. The names have faded, but somewhere in the heart of West London, the echoes remain.